So due diligence before buying an investment property is like due diligence with anything else that you do. And when I have conversations with my business clients around how to buy shares, how to buy other businesses, not property related, the conversation always goes the same. What we want to do is make sure that you understand the industry, you understand the environment, so that you can tick all the boxes, especially when it comes to certain pitfalls in the specific space that you're buying into. So with most businesses, you'd look at regulatory issues where you want to make sure that you understand what issues could arise and prevent you from trading the way that you want to trade. So very specifically in the property industry, what do we want to look at when it comes to just before buying a property? Now, first thing that you need to understand is there's a difference between a property buyer and a property investor. A property buyer, especially a first-time home buyer, would be looking at different things. Due diligence for them looks very different to what due diligence looks like for a property investor. The reason for this is a property investor is looking to earn a return from whatever capital they put down, whereas a property buyer or a first-time home buyer is simply looking to enjoy the use of the property. So their desire, their purpose for buying property is very different to that of a property investor. So as an example, a property buyer would look at certain comfort features, whereas a property investor would look at the ability to rent out this property as an example and actually earn income from it, whereas a property buyer wouldn't be worried about earning income from it as long as the property buyer can live in the property comfortably. So as a property investor, the different due diligences depends on the type of properties that you're buying. It's the same with business. Every type of business has its own requirements. This can range from a buy-to-let, where the due diligence might be slightly lesser cumbersome than a multi-let, then student accommodation, and when planning to do a development, entirely different. So starting right at the bottom, the one commonality between all of these is the condition of the property, right? Now, that's one thing that applies across the board. If you're planning on keeping any structure on the property, you're going to need to ensure that the structure on the property is at least in good order, it's working, and if there is any repairs that need to be made to the structure on the property, that you factor these into the purchase price. Typically with developments, this wouldn't be a concern because you would normally demolish and build over it, but there have been developments that have retained certain structures, especially in the CBD where the structure of the building is kept intact. But with your student accommodation, your multi-lets and your buy-to-lets, you need to ensure that your structure is in good condition. So here, for example, you'd get in property inspectors to inspect the structure itself. Now, another due diligence that you might want to consider, for example, is the zoning of the property. Now, this depends. The zoning would, your requirement for zoning would depend on what you intend to do with the property. And here I would suggest approaching a town planner in order to ensure that the zoning is either correct or that acquiring the necessary zoning is possible. With a buy-to-let, for example, there's usually no issues. But as soon as you start putting more families onto the property, there are certain requirements when it comes to the residential status of the zoning of this property. As student accommodation, even more so, and with the development, you're obviously looking at usually developing a property and having high density individuals and residences. So in that instance, the zoning would be very different. So here you'd want to ensure that your zoning requirements are taken care of and or prospectively could be taken care of. Building plans also very important. This touches on the condition of the property. Now, building plans, if you're intending to retain the structure, will determine whether the actual building itself is in order and suitable for the purpose that you're buying. Now, obviously, this is normally a safety aspect, so even your property buyers would want to have a look at this in addition to the condition of the property. Obviously, as a property investor, depending on what you want to achieve, if you want to expand, for example, do some improvements to the property, you need to ensure that in addition to your zoning requirements, that it is possible to do certain improvements to the property in order to capitalize on this property. Now, obviously, the idea behind this is if you're building student accommodation, you want to increase the capacity of the property that you're buying into. You want to make sure that these building plans are going to be allowed. Otherwise, again, you're going to waste your time when it comes to in this investment. So those are very common features. If you're buying a property that's already a going concern, very often this is rental enterprises where you're buying into a multi-let or a property business that has multiple tenants already on it. Your due diligence will look different because there you want to ensure that the business as it runs at this moment in time is running efficiently and is running correctly. So in those circumstances, you'd want to actually ensure that the numbers that they're giving you are accurate. Are the leases all in place? When are they coming to an end? Which tenants are you taking over? Are you happy with these tenants and with their credibility? Are you confident that they will continue paying their rent? Where are the deposits lying? And are the lease agreements valid? You obviously want to ensure that your rental roll is all in place, because if you take over this business, the last thing that you'd want to find is that there are no lease agreements. Many are going on a month to month, meaning that they can be terminated at any time, and that there's tenants that are delinquent and haven't paid their rent in a number of months, meaning that you're actually inheriting debt or potential debt as opposed to potential income. So those are just a few of the very few features, but some of the main things to look out for when investing in property.